I pushed open the restaurant door and stepped inside, scanning the tables near the windows. Emma was seated in the corner booth, leaning forward across the table. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat Kyle Benton, a project manager from a competing firm. Between them lay a small black USB drive and 2 untouched glasses of water. She slid the drive toward him with the folded receipt underneath. He nodded once and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? Neither of them noticed me. The restaurant lighting was low, and the glass wall behind them reflected more of the harbor lights than the tables inside. I stayed still for a moment, pretending to check my phone. My reflection looked calm enough. I took a slow step closer and recognized the white envelope beside Emma's purse. It carried our company logo. Kyle opened it halfway, saw what was inside, and placed it beneath his napkin. No one at nearby tables seemed to care. I moved toward the bar, choosing a stool that gave me a clear angle of their booth. The bartender asked if I wanted a drink. I said water, nothing else. My phone rested on the counter, camera lens angled just right. The recording light blinked once before I dimmed the screen. The lens caught Emma's hand gestures, her tapping finger, the moment she pushed her hair behind her ear as Kyle spoke. The microphone picked up their voices faintly beneath the hum of plates and chatter. Kyle spoke first, clear enough to catch a few words. He mentioned presentation timing, board preview, and margin copy. Emma nodded, opened her laptop, and turned it slightly. The screen showed the opening slide of a financial proposal, the same one my team finalized 2 nights ago. My initials were still visible in the footer. I watched as she highlighted one figure and retyped a number. Kyle watched every keystroke, silent. He didn't need to ask for the file. He already had the drive. The server approached their table with 2 meals neither of them touched. Emma smiled briefly, then checked her phone. The reflection in the window showed her scrolling through our internal messenger app. She typed something, paused, and deleted the draft. Kyle took a photo of the screen with his phone angled low near his knee. She didn't stop him. He closed his camera app, adjusted his tie, and reached for his jacket pocket again. When they stood to leave, I stayed seated. I watched Kyle walk toward the exit first. Emma followed, carrying her purse and leaving the folded check on the table. The receipt lay face down, but the merchant copy remained. I counted 5 breaths before walking toward their booth. The waiter was clearing plates when I reached it. I picked up the printed copy before he could take it. The transaction time and signature line were clear, both names written in the corner. I slipped the paper into my coat pocket and thanked the waiter. He nodded, not noticing anything unusual. Outside, the night air smelled of sea salt and fuel from nearby boats. I crossed the street to my car, opened the door, and sat still for a moment. The recording had saved automatically to my cloud drive. I replayed the last 10 seconds. The envelope, the handshake, and Emma glancing toward the window before walking out. The sequence was complete, clean, and time-stamped by the system. When the playback ended, I switched off the screen and started the engine. The dashboard clock blinked against the dark windshield. I backed out slowly, merging onto the main road without looking back at the restaurant. The file sat on my phone, silent and finished, waiting for whatever would come next. The following morning, I opened my laptop and reviewed the expense reports for the previous month. Emma's company card listed 3 transactions at the same restaurant, all during weeks I was out of town on site inspections. Each charge matched 2 entrees, 2 beverages, and a service tip round to even figures. I cross-checked the timestamps against her calendar. Every entry was marked yoga session or client feedback call. The details were neat, consistent, and designed not to raise questions. I searched the rideshare history linked to her phone number. 4 recent trips ended at the marina, less than 2 blocks from that restaurant. The drop-off times aligned with the dinner charges. The driver notes showed short distances and no return trips logged. It was a small pattern, but enough to map a timeline. I printed the receipts, circled each location, and placed them in a single folder labeled verifiable. The label mattered. I wanted evidence, not emotion. Her messages had changed tone over the last month. Responses grew shorter, the punctuation precise. When I texted updates from field visits, she replied with acknowledgments instead of questions. I noticed she stopped leaving her phone face down. The home Wi-Fi router listed a new device ID under her profile, tagged Work. The IP logs from my corporate dashboard showed login attempts from a cafe network at irregular hours. I recorded the MAC address in my notes. Patterns only mattered if recorded accurately. At work, I tested my assumptions quietly. I sent Emma a draft spreadsheet with a missing figure in the revenue line. An intentional error, obvious to anyone reading closely. Hours later, Kyle's team submitted a matching proposal to a mutual client, and the same incorrect figure appeared in their document. The coincidence removed doubt. I copied both files into a secure drive and saved the metadata. That evening, Emma returned home later than usual. She said traffic near the bridge had stalled for an hour. I nodded and kept working at the kitchen table. Her laptop bag rested near the counter. The zipper was partly open, revealing a printed agenda with Kyle's company letterhead, visible beneath a stack of papers. She noticed me glance, but didn't react. She made tea, checked her phone, and left the mug half full when she went to shower. I photographed the agenda's visible corner without touching the bag. Over the next few days, I recorded routine behavior. Departure times, call durations, and destinations matched predictable patterns. Nothing outwardly suspicious. Yet the sequence of details repeated too perfectly. One afternoon, a courier delivered an unmarked envelope addressed jointly to her and me. Inside were printed hotel invoices from a resort she had listed on her corporate expense sheet as conference retreat. The billing signature was hers alone. I filed the originals in a locked drawer next to the restaurant receipts. I reviewed surveillance access logs from the office building. Emma's badge showed after-hours entries twice during weekends when she claimed to be with friends. The camera timestamps matched her entry ID, but showed her carrying a black flash drive identical to the one Kyle took. No other staff were present during those entries. I noted each clip reference number and exported still frames for confirmation. By the end of that week, the documentation filled a small folder with printed evidence. Every page was factual: receipts, logs, screenshots, and photos. Nothing speculative. I placed the folder on my desk, aligned the corners, and closed the lid. The facts now held shape and order. I didn't decide anything that night. I only confirmed what was real and verifiable, leaving motive for later. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and logged into the compliance portal. The first step was verifying digital access trails. Our internal system stored audit logs for every file transfer. I searched Emma's user ID and filtered for external connections. 3 entries appeared over the last month, each originating from a cafe network registered downtown. The download size matched the financial proposal folder from our project directory. I exported the log as a PDF, printed it, and placed it in a new binder labeled Chain. At mid-morning, I called Alicia Grant, an analyst from compliance. She specialized in metadata recovery. I explained that I needed an off-record verification of transfer destinations. Alicia didn't ask why. She simply said she'd run a trace under standard confidentiality. Within hours, she confirmed the files had been opened on a device tagged to a domain used by Kyle's firm. The connection alone wasn't proof of payment, but it was enough to establish a link. She sent a signed summary report through encrypted email. I printed that too. At lunch, I visited the same restaurant, the bistro near the marina. The manager, Mark Turner, recognized me immediately. He smiled and asked if I wanted my usual table. I said yes, keeping my tone neutral. While waiting, I scanned the environment. The corner booth where Emma and Kyle had sat was now empty. A staff member replaced table numbers and cleared receipts into a folder behind the counter. When Mark returned with the menu, I asked if my company account had pending transactions there. He nodded, checked the register, and confirmed 3 bookings under Emma's name. Each had been processed manually, not through the online platform. I asked if I could get copies of the receipts for reconciliation. He hesitated but agreed after I presented my ID badge. He printed duplicate copies from the POS terminal. Each showed Emma's signature next to the restaurant stamp. I thanked him, paid for my meal, and walked out with a new stack of documents folded in my jacket. The pattern was consistent. The same table, same hour, and similar total each time. That evening, I set up a controlled test on my office laptop. I created a decoy folder titled Client Forecasts Q3 and filled it with placeholder data. Within one spreadsheet, I inserted a deliberate anomaly, a reference phrase using 2 unique words never used elsewhere. The file sat open on my desktop, visible to anyone accessing the system remotely. I wanted to know if that phrase would surface outside our network. 2 days later, Alicia called. She'd flagged a document from Kyle's firm submitted to a client. The unique phrase appeared in one of their pricing slides, identical spacing and punctuation. The metadata timestamp showed it was created 6 hours after my test file. I requested a formal hash comparison. Alicia confirmed a 100% match. That result was undeniable. The phrase could only have come from my decoy file. I printed the verification sheet and placed it on top of the stack. The binder now contained receipts, logs, and cross-confirmations. Each page built a single narrative without commentary. Emma's phone buzzed later that night while we sat in the living room. She glanced at it, typed briefly, and turned it face down. I noticed a message preview that read, "Confirm copy complete." She excused herself to the bedroom. I didn't follow. Instead, I checked the network monitor on my laptop and saw an active file transfer in progress. I saved the session record as proof. When she returned, I asked nothing. The evidence was sufficient. Every next step required precision, not confrontation. I closed the laptop, unplugged the drive, and wrote a single note in my folder margin. Sequence verified. If this were you, would you act or wait? By the end of that week, everything lined up too clearly to ignore. The bait phrase had surfaced in Kyle's proposal. The receipts matched the pattern, and the transfer logs confirmed repeated data movement from Emma's account. I printed a timeline on one sheet, each event linked to verifiable sources. I didn't need interpretation. The information spoke for itself. That night, I decided to confront her once, directly and without argument. She came home around 8, carrying her laptop bag and a takeout container. I sat at the dining table with the folder open beside me. She greeted me casually and asked if I'd eaten. I said yes and motioned to the chair across from me. She hesitated but sat down. I placed 3 printed documents on the table, the restaurant receipts, the USB transaction clip, and Alicia's metadata report. Each page was numbered and stapled. I said only, "These are from the last month. You can read them." She looked through them slowly, stopping at the photo showing Kyle pocketing the USB drive. Her expression didn't change much, but her breathing did. I waited until she finished. Then I asked, "Was there any reason to involve him in my proposal?" She said, "You don't understand. He offered compensation." Her tone stayed level, almost procedural. I asked how long it had been happening. She said 3 months, maybe 4. Kyle paid her directly in cash through Mark, the restaurant manager. Each payment matched the value of the shared data. I took out the printed screen, still showing her laptop open at the restaurant. She didn't deny it. She said Kyle promised her a position once his company secured the next contract. The offer was conditional on continued access. She said she needed financial security, that I traveled too much, and that opportunity was rare. I listened, but didn't comment. I didn't want explanation, only facts. After she finished, I told her the evidence had already been documented through compliance. She blinked once, then nodded. She asked if I intended to report her. I said that decision wasn't mine anymore. The report was filed at noon. She stood up slowly, closed her laptop, and began unplugging her phone charger from the wall. She said she'd pack tonight and leave by morning. I didn't stop her. The apartment stayed silent for hours except for drawers opening and closing. I moved the binder into my work briefcase. When she walked out, she placed the house keys on the counter. I noticed the small envelope under her arm, the same style Mark had used at the restaurant. She turned back once and said, "I never meant for it to go that far." I said, "It went as far as you allowed." That was the last sentence exchange between us. Later, I sent Alicia the video file and complete evidence folder. She confirmed receipt and replied with a short note. "Verification complete, proceeding with legal notice." I didn't read it twice. The next morning, I handed HR the apartment lease transfer form and removed her access credentials from the network. The compliance director scheduled an internal review meeting for the following week. The chain of events was now formal, not personal. That evening, I walked past the restaurant again. Through the window, Mark was serving another table, moving plates and receipts as usual. Nothing about the scene suggested anything had changed, yet every detail looked different. I didn't enter. The work ahead no longer required emotion, only follow-through. The next morning, I met Alicia in her office to review the evidence chain. She had already preserved the files under case documentation, but I wanted to move further, beyond exposure, toward control. I explained that Kyle's firm had used proprietary data to win bids before. A public accusation would draw both attention and delay. I preferred precision. Alicia understood. We outlined a controlled sting operation designed to catch them repeating the process, this time with verifiable proof of transaction. I prepared a new file on my company laptop titled Strategic Proposal Draft, Confidential. Inside, I inserted detailed projections with deliberately altered figures. Each document carried a unique phrase embedded in the text, one that would serve as a digital marker if copied. I also included an invisible watermark linking back to our internal server. Only one device could open it without triggering a trace alert. If Kyle or Emma accessed the file, Alicia would receive an instant notification. The plan required timing. Mark's restaurant remained their regular meeting place, and the next company payment review fell on Friday evening. I scheduled a reservation under a generic name, 3 tables away from their usual booth. I arranged for a secondary camera to capture the service corridor. Alicia would monitor the file remotely while I observed the physical exchange. Every step was logged in writing, with signatures for legal validation. That afternoon, I visited the bistro again to confirm logistics. Mark greeted me politely. I asked if I could book a corner table for a client dinner. He checked the register and confirmed availability. I paid in advance and left a note requesting privacy for a financial discussion. He seemed pleased with the tip and wrote it down. I noted his behavior. Consistent, confident, unaware that the situation had already shifted beyond casual transactions. Back at my apartment, I tested the recording setup. The first camera would face the booth, disguised within a pen resting on the table. The second would remain in my jacket pocket, lens aligned with a small cut in the fabric. The microphone app would run continuously, saving data to a hidden folder. Each piece of equipment had a time-synced stamp. Alicia's team at Compliance would verify the metadata during and after the meeting. On Thursday, I sent Emma a message from my work account, copying a summary of the proposal draft for review. The subject line read, "Internal check, not final." I knew she would forward it to Kyle within hours. Alicia confirmed the download activity that afternoon. The file opened on a new IP registered to his company. That confirmed the bait had landed. The next step was simple. Wait for the physical meeting to complete the chain. Friday arrived without incident. I dressed formally, blending in with other professionals dining after office hours. My reservation time was set for 7. When I entered, Mark guided me to the reserved table, unaware of the cameras. From my seat, I could see their booth reflected in the glass wall. The folder lay ready on their table before Emma even arrived. She sat down first, opened her laptop, and checked her phone. Kyle arrived minutes later, carrying a briefcase. They greeted each other with small talk, no visible tension. When Mark approached with the check presenter, Kyle slipped the marked envelope inside. The exchange was routine, almost invisible. I pressed the record button on my phone, steady and silent. The plan was functioning exactly as designed. Everything depended on documentation, not confrontation. I didn't move until Alicia's message appeared on my screen. Trigger confirmed. Would you call this revenge or justice? Please tell us in the comments. The alert from Alicia arrived at 7:42 p.m. A simple message. Confirm transfer, camera feed active. I kept my gaze on the menu, pretending to read, while the phone in my hand recorded steadily. Across the room, Emma and Kyle leaned toward each other. She opened her laptop and displayed the same proposal I had prepared. The modified numbers, the inserted phrase, and the watermark sat right there in full view. Kyle read quietly, nodded once, and pulled an envelope from his jacket. Mark approached their booth with a casual smile, carrying the check folder. Kyle slipped the envelope beneath the bill, sliding it toward Mark without looking up. Mark pocketed it in a single motion before leaving. I zoomed the camera slightly, ensuring that both hands were visible in the frame. The entire action took less than 10 seconds. Nothing dramatic, only deliberate precision. Alicia's live feed confirmed a simultaneous remote login from Kyle's company server. The connection traced directly to the document's embedded code. I stayed for another 10 minutes, long enough to capture the completion of the exchange. Emma closed her laptop and signaled for another drink. Kyle stood, adjusted his jacket, and shook her hand. The camera caught the handshake clearly. He left first. Emma remained seated, scrolling through her messages. The waiter dropped off the receipt folder, and she signed it with her usual looping initials. I noted the timestamp and folded my napkin neatly. Then I paid my bill, stood up, and walked toward the exit without looking in their direction. Outside, the street was quiet. The sound of waves against the harbor wall carried faintly through the night. I crossed to my car, placed the phone on the dashboard, and replayed the footage once to confirm clarity. Every motion was visible: the envelope handoff, the handshake, and the open laptop screen showing our trace phrase. I uploaded the video to a secure drive and texted Alicia. "Evidence complete." She replied within a minute. "Legal documentation in progress." By Monday morning, the compliance team had already drafted the report. Each frame was synchronized with file transfer logs, account timestamps, and payment verification from the restaurant's point-of-sale data. The marked bills Kyle had handed to Mark matched serial numbers recorded by our accounting department. Alicia's watermark analysis confirmed file duplication during the same time window. The sequence was exact. The evidence chain required no interpretation, only acknowledgement. That afternoon, the legal notice went out. Kyle's firm received an official demand citing misuse of proprietary material, breach of confidentiality, and attempted procurement of trade secrets. Copies were sent to Emma's personal and corporate addresses. Mark was called in by the restaurant owner for questioning regarding unrecorded cash transactions. Each action unfolded systematically, without warning or publicity. The process was slow, precise, and irreversible. I didn't speak to Emma again. Her company access was already revoked, and her email auto-response listed "on leave." I returned to my work as usual, maintaining the schedule without interruption. The story now existed entirely in documents, numbered, signed, and archived. My part in it was finished. The recordings, transfers, and receipts had achieved their purpose. That evening, I walked by the same restaurant again. Through the glass, a different couple sat in the corner booth. The tablecloth was new, the lighting softer. Nothing remained of the events that had unfolded there, yet every reflection on the window carried a trace of that night. I stayed for a moment, and then turned away, satisfied that the record, not emotion, held the final word. By midweek, the internal review was complete. The findings summary spanned 7 pages, each section cross-referenced by document ID, file hash, and video timestamp. The conclusion stated that Emma and Kyle had engaged in coordinated information transfer for monetary gain. Mark Turner's involvement was listed under facilitation of exchange. Copies of the report went to both corporate legal departments, the restaurant owner, and our external auditor. No part of it relied on my testimony alone. Every fact was independently verified. Kyle's firm received the demand notice first. Within 24 hours, their legal counsel requested negotiation. Our company declined and filed a formal complaint with the Industry Ethics Board. Kyle was suspended pending investigation, and his client accounts were reassigned. Emma's termination notice followed the next morning. It cited breach of confidentiality and conflict of interest. Her final paycheck was withheld until the review concluded. The company arranged for a courier to collect her devices, which were sealed and archived. The restaurant owner called me that afternoon. He thanked me for informing him before the press did. Mark had been questioned earlier that day. Surveillance footage matched the envelope exchange exactly as captured in my recording. The cash recovered from the safe equaled the sum documented in the compliance report. Mark was dismissed immediately. The owner promised to cooperate fully with authorities and replace all staff involved. His tone stayed measured, professional, and distant. The way people sound when damage has already settled. Alicia sent me the final certification notice from the compliance team. the wording was precise. All investigative objectives completed, case file archived. She mentioned the ethics board would issue public findings within 30 days. Until then, confidentiality remained in effect. I agreed, acknowledging receipt of the closure file. She congratulated me on the clean execution, though her tone implied more relief than praise. For her, the matter ended there. For me, it shifted into aftermath. The following weeks passed quietly. Colleagues avoided direct reference to the incident, but small gestures revealed awareness, short nods, subtle pauses, quiet respect. The project I'd protected advanced ahead of schedule, securing renewal for another fiscal year. Kyle's firm lost 2 contracts and issued a statement about procedural irregularities. Emma's name disappeared from their correspondence. Nothing dramatic followed, just gradual distance, as if they'd been erased from routine conversation. At home, the space felt different. Her absence left the apartment clean, organized, and silent. I boxed the remaining items she hadn't collected, a few books, kitchenware, and documents unrelated to work, and left them with the property manager. I replaced the locks the same day. The habit of checking logs and receipts stayed with me longer. Every small detail reminded me how easy it had been for ordinary routines to hide deliberate acts. By the time the ethics board published its summary, the outcome was predictable. Kyle's firm received formal censure, a 1-year bidding suspension, and a financial penalty. Emma's involvement was noted without further legal action since restitution had been achieved. Mark faced charges for unrecorded cash handling. My name appeared once in the report, listed under reporting party. That single line was sufficient. When I read the final paragraph, I closed the file and archived it with the others. The story had begun with a simple observation, 2 people at a table, and ended with documents filed under corporate law. The process had been methodical from start to finish, every action justified by evidence. Nothing about it felt like revenge anymore. It was accountability, written in formal language, recorded for record-keeping. 3 months later, I transferred to a new regional office on the opposite coast. The relocation request had been approved quietly, listed under operational alignment. My new workspace overlooked the port, where container cranes moved in steady rhythm. The pace suited me. Most of my work involved reviewing contracts, verifying budgets, and maintaining client correspondence. Routine felt reliable again. The past existed only in archived folders, sealed and indexed. The apartment lease from before was reassigned to another employee. I signed a release form and handed over the keys without comment. The landlord asked if I wanted mail forwarding. I declined. The few remaining items Emma had left behind were delivered to her through legal courier, each package logged with a receipt. I kept one envelope, the restaurant bill from that night, filed at the back of my drawer. Not as sentiment, just record. Occasionally, I received short updates from Alicia. She mentioned that the compliance training manual now included an anonymized version of my case as a study example. The section emphasized digital traceability and procedural accuracy. She thanked me for allowing its inclusion. I read the draft once, confirmed all identifying details were removed, and signed the consent form. My involvement in the matter officially ended that day. One evening, after finishing late, I walked along the waterfront near my new apartment. A small restaurant faced the harbor, similar layout, same warm lighting. Inside, people talked quietly, their tables reflecting in the glass. I stood there a moment, watching. The scene familiar, but distant. The difference lay not in the place, but in the awareness that documentation always outlives intent. I walked on, leaving the reflections behind. At work, new projects filled the calendar. Each contract required data security measures, two-step authentication, and layered encryption. Procedures now standard because of what had happened. During a quarterly review, the director cited case-based reform without naming anyone. The room nodded, unaware that the example originated from my report. It didn't matter. Systems improve when lessons become process. That was enough. One morning, I received a message from an unknown number. It contained no greeting, only 3 words. "I'm sorry. E." I didn't reply. The message wasn't hostile, just unnecessary. The outcome had already written itself in policies, not apologies. I archived it under miscellaneous, marked as no response required. Life adjusted in predictable patterns. Mornings began with coffee, commutes with routine calls, evenings with paperwork. I no longer checked devices for irregular logins. The habit faded naturally. When colleagues discussed workplace confidentiality, I listened without comment. None of them needed to know how close I'd once watched every detail, every number, every handshake. Weeks later, I attended a compliance workshop for new staff. The final slide displayed a quote: "Integrity is proven by record, not claim." I recognized Alicia's phrasing. After the session, she approached and asked how things were. I said everything was stable. She nodded, smiled once, and left. That was the final conversation between us about that case. Looking back, nothing extraordinary remained. Only a sequence of practical decisions. Betrayal, discovery, and consequence had become line items in corporate memory. The result wasn't satisfaction, but certainty. Truth, once recorded, doesn't vanish. It simply stops needing defense. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.